Okay guys, so today I'm going to show you how to edit this photo here. I currently have this image in Lightroom, so I already have a setting on it just to show you the before and the after. I basically just color corrected, let's see, don't really like that. I just basically color toned it, added some clarity. I like to bring the saturation down and then increase the vibrance so it doesn't look like super saturated. It's just like a more subtle way to handle color, I think. And then I brought the highlights down, but I brought the shadows up to make it more even. Let's see, I'm going to take the green down a little bit more just so it's not super distracting. And I have a split toning here just to give it a smidge of color, and then nothing else for this. Okay, so I'm going to bring it into Photoshop by hitting Command E. And I'm just going to wait. Okay. Here we go. So today's a little slow. So first thing I always do is Command J to duplicate the layer, and then I'm going to hit Command Shift X to open Liquify. So first I'm gonna liquify her jawline just a bit, shape the ear. I'm gonna push the jaw up, and as I'm doing this, I'm making my brush smaller or bigger depending on the area that I'm going to be moving. I usually, for example, if I'm going to bring the shoulder down, I would never make the brush this small just because then I might accidentally do something like this. I like to do big brushes just so it looks more natural. So I'm just going along her shape. I'm not really doing anything super dramatic. I'm just doing a bit of a tuck, especially for her nose, just to make it a smidge smaller. But this is just enhancing what she has. It's not really changing anything, really. And I'm doing I'm going like all around her face and her body here just to give it an even liquify. So I'm not gonna like just edit this area and not touch this area. It just makes more sense to kind of do everything so it looks even. And they're very minute changes. So just to give you guys before and after, I'm just tucking her in just a bit. One thing that I've noticed some beauty photographers do is that they'll make the eyes just a little bit bigger. So I thought I would try doing that today, but I actually don't really like to do that. So I'm hitting Command Z to just undo everything. I think I might maybe bring her lips bigger and then make her nose smaller. But again, I would use a really big brush just so it's not as obvious. And then actually what I'm going to do is take the liquify tool and I'm using just this like push tool. It's called the forward warp. So I'm just gonna push her eyebrow down actually, because I remember on set it was really uneven. Okay, so I think that's what I would do. I'm going a little bit slower today, but usually I would not do as much for liquify. All right, so just before and after. So I really brought that eyebrow down, but that's the only thing. Okay, and then now I'm going to Command E to merge both layers, and then here under my actions I have the it should be high-low high-low frequency, but I named it wrong, but high-low frequency. Hit play, and this is going to duplicate my background layer and just create this separation for me. Okay, so Oops, you know what I'm gonna do actually, yeah, okay. So now I'm gonna zoom in, and usually when I'm skin retouching, I will zoom in at 200% at least, if not more. And I'm just taking the spot healing tool here and just going over any obvious blemishes. And then I'm going to take this clone stamp tool, make it really big, and I'm only at 14%. And the brush that I'm using is, the hardness is at 0, just because, oops, I want it to be very soft and feathered, and I don't want to see an edge. And so for me, what I like to do for skin retouching is to just alternate between spot healing and clone stamp. Just smooth out some of this stuff. I've tried using the dodge and burn technique. It just takes way too long for me, so I prefer to use this technique. But it's all up to you guys. The one thing that I don't love about the spot healing is that it retains the texture of the skin. So like this, for example, which is like, I think it's makeup fall off, I would want to get rid of that completely, so you kind of have to clone stamp it twice to get rid of the texture, or spot heal it twice on the low and the high layer. And in case some of you guys don't know what the high-low frequency separation layer does, is that basically it separates your image into 2 layers. The low frequency is I think the color layer, and then the high frequency is the texture layer. So basically I can edit the skin without losing the texture, if that makes any sense. But yeah, so right now this is the part that will take the longest, because I'm going through the pores and taking out anything that is super obvious, like this here. I mean, she has really good skin, so it really is just about refining like this area. Like this area under the eye is reading kind of red, so I'm just gonna go over it lightly with this patch of the skin with the clone stamp. And I'll, like the same thing with the liquify tool, I'll go back and forth between using a big brush and a small brush just for certain areas. Like I'm trying to target this area here with the lines. I think I would use a very small brush here like that. But I like to alternate between big and small using the left and right bracket. That's the shortcut to make your brush bigger or smaller, because I think it makes it very uniform when you're editing skin. So it's not like one area is overly edited and the other area isn't. This kind of keeps everything cohesive. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but just watch this bar here, because you'll see me switch from clone stamp to spot healing pretty frequently. And one thing I have to note is just don't be afraid to get close to the edges of the skin, or edges of just like the edge of the skin here, because like a lot of times what happens is photographers will edit up to here, and then this part, the texture looks different just because they were afraid to get that close. So you have to get close to make it look even. And then don't forget to zoom out intermittently as you're editing, because then you can see how the skin is looking as a whole, because you don't want to over edit certain parts of the image. And then because I use the clone, and I'll also, if something doesn't look right, I'll Command Z and just undo it and redo it again. So you just really have to be slow and patient with this. And then I'm going over this hard edge with a clone stamp. So for me, they're clone stamp and spot healing tool are my 2 best friends. And then for here, for the chin, there's just a bit of I don't know how you call this, just like I can see the pores, it's like rough texture, so I'm just going to smooth it out by spot healing first and using a big brush and a small brush, just like depending, and then I'll go over it with the clone stamp to just smooth it out. So it might look like I'm not doing anything, but then when you see the before and after, you can really tell the difference. Okay, so I'm not gonna get rid of her hairs, but I'm just gonna, like the obvious ones I'll smooth out. And then I'm gonna go over it with the clone stamp to just even it out. And that's why I love using the clone stamp and the spot healing with the frequency separation, just because it's a very forgiving technique and you can kind of go fast. Okay. While still keeping the texture and stuff, while it still looks realistic. And don't forget about the lips. I feel like I used to always forget about the lips until I booked a lip campaign, and then it was all about the lips and the lip wrinkles and all that, and now it's just made me super aware to smooth out the lips, just even if it's a little bit, it kind of makes a difference. And the thing with retouching is that you can keep going. Like there's always more that you can do. My whole thing is I like it when it doesn't look overly edited, so it just depends on you, but it does take practice to kind of see how far. If you've gone too far, I think you'll know. My rule of thumb is if you can see it, then you've gone too far. If you can see the changes, like, yeah, that's Photoshop, then yeah, you've gone too far. So I always like to dial it back. But this part is the most time consuming. So I'm just gonna zoom out and see how far we've gone. Okay, and because I'm I'm clone stamping at such a low opacity, even though it seems like I'm doing a lot, it actually isn't. So the thing with the cheek here is that when I clone stamp, I always kind of follow the motion of the face. So it's kind of like if you were going to if you were going to highlight this part, you would go in kind of like a diagonal motion against the cheekbone, and that's what I would do for when I'm editing as well. It's kind of like you're applying makeup to the model. So I would just take the clone stamp here, smooth it out, and I would just like copy this area and bring it up. And then use the spot healing to just get rid of things that look like they shouldn't be there, or it's just like it stands out too much. I mean, again, this model has a great skin and she doesn't even have like literally nothing on her nose. That's the crazy part. Because if I was going to be editing my nose, I would have so much blackheads. But yeah, don't forget to go like to all areas of the face, just because sometimes it can easily be like overly edited on the bottom half of her face, and then the forehead hasn't been touched at all. So just keep it consistent. So with the forehead, I'm using, just like with the chin, I'm using spot healing to kind of drag out these lines, and then I'm going to go back in later with the clone stamp to blend everything. Oh, so think of spot healing like concealer. So you're just like dabbing it in certain areas and then Clone Stamp is your foundation that you use to blur everything. I literally just thought of that right now, but it's genius. Okay, so this is my first ever like talking video going through how I would edit this. I mean, I've like shared with a lot of like my assistants how I would edit, but this is kind of the first time where I'm like explaining it to you guys. Let me know what you think. Okay, so I think I might have gone too far, but let's see. So now I'm using a bigger brush for the forehead, and I'm going to zoom out and just make the brush even bigger and like blend and blur the forehead. Okay, and then I'm just going to take, there's redness here, so I'm just going to blend it out a bit. Oh, and then when you're sampling, I select current layer. I don't like to do like current layer and below or all layers. I feel like sometimes that picks up some random like random pigmentation. I'm just going to get rid of this stray hair. And then again, taking, oops, shoot. So I realized I was clone stamping on the wrong layer. I mean, actually, I had meant to do it for like 2 because I wanted to get rid of the hairs. Let's see. Can't really tell a difference, but you should always be on the low frequency separation. Okay, so there, before and after. The forehead looks a lot more smooth now. And I do see like my reflection in the eyeball and then all these like redness in the eyeball, but I'm not gonna fix that right now because I need to do that on like a solid layer and not on the high frequency. Okay, so let's just, looking at the face, let's see. That looks pretty good to me. I think I'm just gonna fix this part of the contour. It looks a little low. And then if you can see here, that's the problem with Clone Stamp. Sometimes you pick up something else, so you kind of have to go backwards and redo it. Okay, I'm just gonna go here. Okay, you really have to be careful what you pick up, because, okay. Perfect. I think I would stop here. I think the skin looks good. You can still see a lot of texture, but everything looks smooth. I'm just gonna smooth this part out. And I'm using Clone Stamp right now, and if you can see like my history, I'm just rapidly clicking. Okay, so just looking at the face. This looks pretty good to me already. I think next I'm gonna move to the body, and I'm just using spot healing here to get rid of all these blemishes. Like moles or whatever they are. Just zapping them away. Okay, and then I'm going to use a really big brush to kind of just feather the skin. Now, I don't know if I'm doing this right, you guys, because I have never gone, I mean, I've gone to photo school, but like, they didn't teach us this. So I've just kind of learned on my own. as to what I think looks good and how to get the results I want. So I'm just constantly learning, updating my techniques. Okay. And I'm very, very detail oriented, so don't ever, like, it's not like, oh, I'm editing the skin and I'm gonna forget about the rose. Like, you have to edit, like, every part of the image matters, including these, like, yellow parts of the flower. You know, it's just like the details. And then I'm using a really thin brush to get rid of this hair. And then I'll like get these later. But just looking at the body, it looks pretty good. But yeah, that's why you always have to zoom out and then survey it from like a bigger thumbnail just to see if you've gone too far, and then if you notice something, then you zoom back in to get it. Okay. Okay, so I think, let's see. Now I'm noticing this line here kind of makes it, I'm just gonna blur it a little bit. Now again, this model has such good skin that this is kind of just like a general gist of retouching. If it was a model with really bad skin, then this would take 10 times longer. Okay, so that's good. I think I would be happy with this. Just let me get this real quick. Okay, so now I'm going to select everything and then hit Shift Command Option E and merge this as a single layer. So basically, it basically just merges all. If you don't want to remember the shortcut, then I think you can just merge visible. Oh wait. Okay, so no, I don't know what the long way to do this is, but you just hit Shift Command Option E. Again, it's Shift Command Option E. Those 4 buttons will merge your 3 layers as a new layer, but still keep the bottom layers, because I'm very much about like not being non-destructive with your work. Like if I don't like something, I like to be able to have the option of going back. So that's why my file sizes are always ginormous, because I keep everything. But now I'm just gonna go edit again, like the stray hairs and all that, like on the more solid layer. So like for something like this, I might actually use the brush tool, sample the background because the background's so even, and I'll just paint out the hairs. It just depends though, because sometimes the background isn't even, so then you have to kind of be really you have to like, so now I'm on brush. So if you can see kind of what's happening here is that this bottom part is slightly darker, so I can actually see my paint strokes. I'm going to hit Command Z and only paint the top. Okay, I think I have to sample the bottom and then paint the bottom that way. I don't know if this is the best way to edit out hair, but that's how I do it. It's just like the fastest way for me. And I'm just not getting that close to it. I'm still leaving some of the fuzz. I feel like that looks more natural, but I will come in with a clone stamp at 100% and get in even closer. And then like this, for example, maybe I'll try to clone stamp it. Yeah. So it just like looks softer. Okay. So for this, I'm going to come in with a clone stamp at 100% and paint out the stray hairs. When I'm treating hair, I don't go too close at first. I like to just get all the big pieces out of the way, and then I'll tailor the edges after. So like for these individual strands, for example, I'm using the spot healing because it's just easier. Okay, and then clone stamp. I don't know why my Photoshop shows like a loading wheel when I'm clone stamping now. It's like so weird. If anybody has a solution, hit me up. Okay, so like for areas like this, I'm gonna go in at 300% and use a really small brush. I'm at 25 right now. And just carefully, paint it out. It's okay if it's not super perfect because I can see that this edge is like lumpy. I'll show you guys how I would fix this to make it more natural. I mean, at the same time though, it is at 300%, so most people can't see it, but still. Okay, so now I'm zoomed in at 300. I'm just gonna go along the hairline and paint this out. And I'm leaving these just to see how it looks. Get rid of this. Oops. Okay. So for pieces like this, let's try how it looks with the spot healing. Not bad. Sometimes I like spot healing just because it's a lot easier. But right now I'm just fixing it with clone stamp. Let's see how this looks with spot healing. Yeah. I forgot the top parts. Okay, there. That's pretty clean, but I will go back and fix this part because it looks broken. So I will, in this case, kind of go right up against the edge here. Don't forget, for retouching, the closer you get, the more accurate you will be. Just because like you can't edit, so close when you're, like I'm at 400% right now. I don't know if that's like being extra, but okay. Just gonna get rid of this edge. I think that's good enough. No, we're striving for excellence here. So, there. Okay, and then I'll just get rid of this, and I think it's looking pretty clean. And again, I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm still using Clone Stamp at the softest edge possible. So, but the thing about Clone Stamp is that the smaller your brush is, the harder the edge will be. Does that make sense? So the smaller your brush is, the harder the edge is. So like for example, if I do like a brush that's this big, the edges are way softer compared to if I do a brush that's this big, you know, it's just more precise. So now I'm gonna just get these edges. Always have to be careful. Okay, so I'm going to show you just how I would fix this knuckle, because you can see it is kind of lumpy. What I would do is put a layer mask on it, and you can just hit this layer mask button, use a black brush, and paint out the edge. Let's see. Oops. And if you don't know how to use a layer mask, shame on you. Sorry, but that's just true. I think I'm gonna do a tutorial just on layer masking because I feel like most people don't know how to use a layer mask. But if you learn Photoshop in the early 2000s, then you do know layer masks. You should. Okay, see, so that's better. So basically what I did was erased part of the image using a layer mask so that I can get a cleaner edge. So if I didn't have this, for example, then I'm gonna zoom in just so you guys can see. This was before and this is after. And I know it's like, I'm at 600%, like it's a little crazy to be that much of a perfectionist, but I think you have to be. And so with this lump, what I'm gonna do is just liquefy it and push it in. So, and I'm using a big brush and just gently and I'm pulling on it, pulling it out and pushing. I'm pulling this part out and then pushing this part in just so it kind of gives it more of a straight edge. And then I'm going to take a big brush and drag the whole thing out so it looks more curved. And then I'm going to push just like this part in a little bit. And now I'm going to bring the shoulders down just because I feel like that makes it have a prettier edge. Oh, I just learned that if you press P, you can see the before and after, or not before and after, but yeah, before and after. Interesting. I'm all about using shortcuts. I just feel like that's faster. You know what, while I'm here, I might as well give her a more tailored kind of ear, you know, the kind that like tucks in and then comes out. It's like more shapely. Just like a little bit. Okay. Did I go too far? Okay, now this looks really funny to me. I'm gonna hit cancel and redo it. Okay, maybe I'm just gonna push this in and not do too much. Sometimes it's okay to admit that you did too much and to just cancel it and redo it. Okay, so that's all I'm gonna do. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the eyeballs. And again, I'm just going to use spot healing to go over the veins. And this is how you can always tell if a model has slept or not, because maybe I shouldn't have said that. Okay. And it's okay if it's not super perfect, because again, I'm going to take the clone stamp and at 26% and just blur it. Someone asked what my preference was for a clean eyeball and if it looked unrealistic. I think my response to that is you would never have noticed if you didn't see the before. So the cleaner the better. So for the eyeball here, I'm gonna use spot healing and see if I can just get rid of this. Like in this way. I'm gonna use clone stamp. I'm using clone stamp to just blur it out, to blur out my reflection. Okay, let's see how that looks. I'm not mad at it. Okay, so I'm gonna do it on this side. And it's okay sometimes if it has that hard line because again, we're gonna go back in with clone stamp to feather it out. I love the clone stamp. And I like using it at such a low opacity. 25 is pretty much my standard, just because that way you can really build on it. Again, I don't like it when you can see the change, so for me it's like, I like it when it's more subtle. So I like 25 opacity because then I can build on it. It's not like 100% and I'm stuck with that. Okay. So let's zoom out, see what that looks like. Okay, just notice this part about the nose. So I'm gonna soften it. Okay. Now I think this is pretty good. I'm just gonna Shift Command E and merge a final layer on top of that. And then now one thing I like to do is just to select the background. Feather, I'm going to use feather 3 and then just do a solid. I'm going to do eye for eyedropper and solid color. And I just like to do like a solid color over the background to give it a more consistent kind of fill. If I wanted to, I will desaturate the background and I'll just do a desat layer, bring the saturation do a saturation layer, bring the saturation all the way down, copy this layer mask, bring it up to here, and then just desaturate the background. But I kind of like the blue background, so I think I'm gonna maybe just do like a 36% desaturation to kind of still keep the blue, but it's not super obvious. And then, okay, so now, going back to my final layer, I'm just gonna Command Q to sharpen. That's my personal shortcut for sharpen. I set it to Command Q, but you could set it to whatever you want. This is my sharpen settings. I usually like to press and hold this preview just so I can see the before and after. Honestly, it's not, I used to sharpen to 4 point something, but I just feel like that's like too sharp. You know, I like it when it's like really, really subtle. So like 2.1, maybe like 2.8 is like, it's like the sweet spot. I'm gonna do 2.3, but I never really change it. So like this is like kind of where this is like my happy place, 2.3 or 2.1. Hit OK. Okay, so now here's the fun part. I just learned this like a month ago, but hit Command, maybe hit Option, and then, okay, so on your keyboard, hit Option, and then at the same time, press this Create New Layer tool, and then you're gonna go to Overlay, Fill with Overlay Neutral, hit OK, and then that's gonna give you this like gray background. Now, you can press O for darken, and then, or you can just like on the toolbar, you could just press this button and we're gonna do burn tool. And I have it for the to burn the midtones at 29%, and here you're just gonna contour her face. And you're just gonna go in and paint the darker parts of the image. Like maybe, and you could use a smaller brush for like the bottom of the lip to give her more of a pout. I mostly just use it for the cheeks to add a bit more contour, and then also the shoulders. Okay, and then you're gonna press X. Oh wait, no, you're just gonna right click and press dodge. And then now you're gonna highlight parts of her face. So I'm using a very small brush here to just add pointed areas of highlights. And I'm not adding anything new, I'm just going over the areas that the makeup artist has already done, and I'm just enhancing them. Okay. And don't worry if wondering if this is too much. Just do the areas that you want first, and then I think now that I'm done, I'm going to take this and put it at maybe 40%. So it's like right when you can start to see it, and that's kind of how I like to do things. So it's not like super obvious, but it really makes such a huge difference. I'm putting it at 40%, but look how much of a pop that gives it. It's like genius. Okay. And then I would just hit save. And then it will bring it usually back into Lightroom. But my computer's a little slow today, so let's see if it actually does. Well, it's still saving. Okay, so it just finished, and here we go. It loaded into, so now I have two copies in Lightroom. I have the raw file, and then I have the photoshopped version. So I'm just gonna hide the Photoshop version, or I'm gonna hide the raw file behind the Photoshop version. And then from here, sometimes in Lightroom, I will make additional edits. Like maybe I'll bring the highlights down and just bring the image down a little bit. I mean, I'm actually really happy with this photo, so I don't think there's much I would do to it. One thing that sometimes I do is I'll bring the clarity down just a smidge, in case to just like soften the skin. But this is pretty good to me, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and from here I'm gonna export. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and let me know in the comments what you thought of this tutorial, and be sure to subscribe.